The wind screamed across the open plains like something alive that night, stealing the warmth right out of the air. Jack Rourke braced himself against the blast as he swung the heavy barn door shut, its hinges protesting with a long metallic groan. Snowflakes swirled like sparks from a dying fire, melting on his mustache and stinging his cheeks. The storm had rolled in faster than he expected, too fast, too mean, like a white wall, pushing across the land with the intent to swallow everything in its path. His horses were restless. Shadow, the black mare, paced her stall and tossed her head, snorting at the wind's fury. Jack reached out and steadied her cheek. "Easy, girl," he murmured, rubbing slow circles behind her ears. "Storm'll pass. They always do." But his gut wasn't so sure. The air felt heavy in a way that made the skin on the back of his neck prickle. He'd lived 40 winters on this land. He knew when a storm meant trouble. Jack tossed extra hay into the stalls, secured the tack, and double-checked the latch. The storm rattled the roof, a low thunder-like rumble rolling across the sky. He paused at the barn door, hand hovering over the latch, listening. The world beyond was white noise, wind, snow, and the occasional groan of distant trees bending under the weight. He pulled his coat tighter and stepped out into the night. The snow was already knee-deep, and each step was a battle. The cold crawled under his clothes, biting like a feral dog. He trudged toward the house, boots sinking heavily with each step. But something flickered in his peripheral vision, a small, trembling glow far to his right. He stopped squinting into the storm. There it was again, a lantern light. But not just anywhere, it was coming from the direction of old William Hale's homestead. Jack frowned. William hadn't been well for months. The old man could barely carry a pail of water anymore. He rarely left the house except to feed the chickens, and even then he walked with a slow, painful stoop. A lantern outside in a blizzard? It didn't sit right. Jack hesitated for only a breath before veering off the path to his house, cutting through the rising drifts toward William's place. The snow hammered at his face, the wind pushing against him with every step, like an invisible wall. His eyelashes froze together, making the world a blur of white streaks and shadows. He leaned forward, muscles straining, boots slipping beneath him. For a few moments he lost sight of the lantern completely. Panic prickled sharp in his chest. Storms like this could disorient even the most seasoned rancher. He forced himself to focus on the faint outline of William's fence posts and kept moving. Finally, through the swirl of snow, he saw the flicker again, closer now but wavering weakly, fighting for life just like everything else in the storm. Jack reached the front yard, breath heaving in loud gusts. And there, half swallowed by snowdrifts, lay the lantern on its side, its flame struggling behind a frost-covered glass. Beside it was a shape, a small motionless bundle in the snow. Jack's heart lurched painfully. He dropped to his knees and brushed away the snow with rough, gloved hands. A woman. A young woman. Her hair was half frozen, dark strands stiff with ice. Her shawl was soaked through, stuck to her skin. Snow clung to her lashes, her cheeks, the corner of her trembling mouth. Her lips were blue. Her hands were bare. "Hey!" Jack's voice cracked as he cupped her icy cheek. "Can you hear me?" For a terrible second, she did not move. Then her eyelids fluttered faintly, just enough for him to see the glazed terror in her dark eyes. Her lips parted. "Please," she gasped, the words barely carried by the wind. "Help, William, he collapsed." Her breath hitched, a faint sob swallowed by the storm. "I couldn't carry him." Jack's pulse thundered in his ears. William was inside, helpless, while this girl, where had she even come from, was freezing to death in the yard. "We're going inside," Jack said, voice firm, steady, louder than the storm. "You're freezing." "Don't you worry about anything else right now." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled instantly. Jack caught her before she hit the snow again. She weighed almost nothing, as light as a child. He lifted her into his arms easily, shocked by how cold her body felt even through his coat. He kicked open William's door, half expecting warmth to greet him. Instead, a sharp wave of cold met his face. The house was frigid, the hearth dark, the air unmoving. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. She wouldn't last long in here either. He set her down in front of the hearth and threw a few logs in, sparking a flame as quickly as he could. The fire crackled uncertainly, then caught, spraying sparks of orange and gold into the dark room. The young woman curled toward the heat weakly, shivering so violently her teeth chattered. "What's your name?" Jack asked, pulling a blanket off William's unused rocker and tucking it around her shoulders. She hesitated, Her voice came out slow, like each syllable hurt. Eliza. He nodded. I'm Jack Rourke. Stay by the fire. I'll check on William. Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. Jack took a candle and walked down the narrow hallway. The boards creaked under his boots, old wood moaning with each step. The house felt wrong, silent in a way that wasn't from sleep but from absence. When he reached William's room, he already knew. The old man lay on the bed, his hands folded loosely on his chest, his skin pale and still. His eyes were closed as though he had drifted off peacefully. A coughing fit must have taken him down, his frail heart unable to keep up. Jack closed his eyes and bowed his head. I should have checked in sooner, old friend. He stayed there a moment, letting the reality settle like the snow drifting outside. When he returned to the hearth, Eliza looked up at him with frightened, searching eyes. Is he gone? She whispered. Jack swallowed, his voice tight. Yes. The words seemed to shatter her. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders trembling violently as she cried, no sound, just pure silent despair. Jack knelt beside her, touching her shoulder gently. Eliza, you can't stay here tonight. You'll freeze. She shook her head frantically as if scared to leave. He sent for me. To be his wife. I came 2 days ago. She lifted her head, tears streaking her cheeks. But he collapsed the moment he opened the door. I tried to help, but the storm... I couldn't leave him. Her breath hitched again, her voice breaking with guilt she didn't deserve. Jack felt something twist deep inside his chest. Listen, he said softly. William was a stubborn old man, but he wasn't heartless. He'd want you safe, and you're coming with me. Eliza searched his face, a lost, trembling soul who had no idea where she belonged now. After a moment, she nodded, barely, but enough. Jack wrapped her tightly in the blanket, lifted her again, and stepped back into the brutal, unforgiving storm. The wind bit at his face. The sky growled overhead, but this time he carried something more fragile than firewood or supplies. He carried a woman fate had thrown into his arms, a woman who had no idea how much her arrival, her mere presence was about to change his life forever. Morning came reluctantly, dragging pale sunlight over the snow-covered world. The storm had spent the night tearing at the plains, but now it slept, leaving behind a cold, heavy silence. Jack stepped outside briefly, to check the drifts and see if the sky held any more threats. The land was still, too still, like everything was holding its breath. When he stepped back into his cabin, the warmth from his stove wrapped around him like a gentle hand. Eliza sat at his wooden table wrapped in one of his thick wool blankets. Her fingers curled around a steaming tin cup. She stared into it as though trying to understand the warmth itself, as if warmth was a luxury she wasn't sure she was allowed. Her dark hair, now thawed and drying, fell over her shoulders in soft tangled waves. She looked up when Jack approached, her expression grateful but cautious. Are you feeling any better? He asked quietly. She nodded. Warm, she whispered as though surprised. I haven't felt warm in days. He poured himself coffee, sat across from her and studied her for a moment. She kept glancing around, her eyes darting to the stove, the windows, the door, as if memorizing escape routes, as if making sure this wasn't another trap she had unknowingly walked into. Jack knew that look. He'd seen it on stray dogs brought in from the cold, creatures unsure if the hand reaching toward them meant shelter or harm. He didn't push her with questions, not yet. The sun climbed slowly, melting frost on the windows. The world outside was bright, blindingly white, but inside his little cabin, a soft warmth began settling in, a quiet, fragile thing. Eliza finished the last sip of her soup and set the cup gently on the table. Thank you, she said, voice steadier now, for saving my life. Jack rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. You'd have done the same for William. Her face fell, shadows sweeping over her features. I tried, she whispered. I really tried. I know you did. He kept his voice low, certain. That's why I need to go back. Give him a proper burial. Her breath hitched, not from fear but from sorrow. I would like to help, she said softly, if you allow it. You're not going back into that cold, Jack said firmly. You barely survived the first time. She didn't argue, but her eyes lowered with guilt. Jack pulled on his coat, gloves, and hat, then stepped outside. The snow crackled under his boots, and the echo of his own breathing filled his ears. He made the long trek back to William's homestead, letting his mind wander. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl he'd carried through the storm. She'd survived, something that would have killed most grown. and alone, terrified, and now she sat in his cabin like a small ghost, unsure whether she was allowed to exist. Inside William's home, the air was still sharp with cold. Jack lit a lamp, walked to the bedroom, and stood for a long moment beside the old man's body. William Hale had been stubborn, but he'd been a friend, one of the few neighbors Jack respected. The man had lived a quiet, lonely life. No wife, no children, no visitors. So why had he ordered a mail-order bride? The question nagged at Jack, until he began gathering the old man's things for burial preparations. That was when he saw it, a sealed envelope beneath William's hand, fingers resting upon it as though guarding it.
The handwriting on the front was shaky.
To whoever finds her. Jack hesitated only long enough to feel a weight settle in his chest, then opened it. The letter inside was short and unsteady, the words uneven where William's breath must have been failing. Her name is Eliza. I sent for her because she deserved a home, not because I deserved a wife. I am dying. I knew I was dying. She doesn't know this. Please don't let her be alone. All I own is hers now, my land, my house, my cattle. She is kind. Give her a gentler life than the one she fled. William Hale. Jack stood frozen, the letter trembling in his hand. William had left everything to the girl who had arrived only 2 days ago. Not for himself. For her? The truth crashed over Jack like another blizzard. William hadn't ordered a bride. He had rescued someone. Jack pressed the letter inside his coat and stepped outside, his breath a plume in the frigid air. He buried William in the small cemetery behind the homestead, marking the grave with the man's old wooden cross. When he finished, frost coated his gloves and eyebrows. But he stayed a moment longer, letting the silence settle around him. You did right by her, he murmured to the grave. I'll make sure she's safe. When he returned to his cabin, Eliza was standing near the stove, stirring a pot of soup she must have found in his pantry. She jumped when he entered, startled like a deer. I wanted to do something, she said quickly, nervously. To repay you. You don't owe me anything, he replied, tugging off his gloves. She watched him, studying his expression. You said we would speak after. Jack nodded slowly and pulled the folded letter from his coat. When she saw her name on the front, she tilted her head, confused. What is that? She asked. Jack set it gently on the table between them. William left it. For you. Eliza's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She opened the letter, eyes scanning the shaky words. At first there was nothing, no breath, no sound, no movement. Then her lips trembled. Her eyes flooded. He knew he was dying, she whispered, voice cracking. Why didn't he tell me? Jack stepped closer. He wanted to give you a chance. A home, a way out. She pressed the letter to her chest, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. No one has ever done something like this for me. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen kindness before, but not like this, not a dying man's last wish to protect someone he barely knew. Eliza, he said slowly, everything he owned, he left to you. She shook, her head in disbelief. No, that can't be. I have nothing. I am nothing. Jack stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You survived things that would have broken most. That doesn't make you nothing. Silence settled between them, warm and soft in the glow of the fire. Eliza lifted her gaze, her eyes glistening. I came here to marry a stranger, she whispered. But I think maybe fate brought me to the wrong door. Jack swallowed hard. Eliza. She reached out slowly, hesitantly, and placed her hand over his, the smallest, bravest touch. You saved me, she said, when I had no one, and I feel safe. With you. Jack didn't move, didn't breathe. He hadn't expected this, not her trust, not her gentle courage, not the way she looked at him as if he'd stepped out of a dream instead of a snowstorm. Outside, the world was frozen white. Inside, something warm began to unfurl, slowly, carefully, like embers catching in a hearth long cold. She stood so close he could see the faint freckles on her cheeks, the way her breath trembled but didn't retreat. Jack, she whispered, voice barely there. What happens now? He didn't know the answer yet, but as he closed his hand around hers, steady, warm, sure, he knew this much. Whatever happened next, they would face it together.